No, it's not on. It is on. It's on. It is on. Okay. All right, good.
Often send somebody as a delegate to our General Assembly, and this year and you're very especially welcome here.
Yes.
And then will you say a blessing at the end?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you. I didn't expect to be back here again this year, having been here last year and a commissioner. But Muriel, who returned to Israel, Palestine just a couple of weeks ago after the funeral of her father, when she got back said, you know, I think it's silly for me to turn around and just go back again to Edinburgh for assembly. You go. I said, well, give it a week. And during that week, she just became all the more convinced that she should stay where she is, and you've heard her this morning. It's great to have her back, and that I should come. And it's been great, although until just a moment ago, by Zoom, to get to know Joanne Billa, who is Archbishop Hossam Naum's representative from the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. It covers 5 countries, including hers, and I look forward to what she might want to say a bit later on. I'm going to start with just a sense of time, very, very quickly, where we are, what day it is on different calendars, and then I'm going to pause for a second and take a different tack, which is to quote the opening verse and the chorus of a song that was written after the joint memorial ceremony, Israeli and Palestinian, on Memorial Day last year. It's that kind of a season. There are an awful lot more people to be remembering this year than there were last year on both sides of the wall, both sides of the war. As far as I make it from Haaretz, it's the 224th day of the war. It's also Friday in the week whose Monday was Memorial Day in Israel, when the war dead, past and current or recent, are remembered. And 2 days later, the beginning of the annual observance, remembering the beginning of Nakba. So the week has been one of remembrance of those who have died, remembrance and assessment of the cause, and you can imagine the range of emotion that is going on. It's very intense, and it's such an either-or time. You're either this side or that side, and anything said critical of this side is immediately X, and anything said critically of that side is immediately Y, and the space to say we are holding everyone in prayer together before the Lord, the space to say we are praying for all of God's children, it has such pressure on it, and yet that's the space we have to hold open. At the beginning of the Memorial Day observance in Israel, there's a siren that sounds throughout the country, and you're to stop immediately what you're doing. And that's how the song begins. The siren sounds, now it starts. 60 seconds in your heart. Come the faces, come the names, comes the love, comes the pain. Absent friends, fallen foes, in grief we come, in grief we go. Sing again for Auld Lang Syne. Who can grieve across the lines? In grief we come across the lines. Shalom, salam, hello. I decided not to bring a guitar and sing it. I'm sure you're all better off because of it. You're seeing an icon on the opening slide. From here on in, I'm going to be using slides, and it will either be narrative or observation or reflection. Some we're going to skip through quickly, others not. This is Madonna and Child, Mary and Jesus. The icon can be found at the church at House of Grace in Haifa, and it's because it is time-worn that it seems to fit. And you can imagine, as many have this year, around Christmas time and since, scenes like the following, which I continue to use now as my profile image on Facebook. This was designed by Kelly Lattimore from the States, and it came out soon after the war began. The Holy Family, not just Jesus under the rubble. And you know, in that way you can engage a symbol, different perhaps from the way you hear words. Symbols seem to have more room for association in them. I don't know what time it was that I saw this. I started to look at those halos of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and they began to look to me like some kind of protection shield, keeping the war off their heads. But of course, the overall image is that the war has landed on their heads. But what protection would holiness be? What protection would love and faith, hope, and love be? What protection is that in a time like this? It's one of the questions that has detained us. I'm going to go now to Oscar, another slide, the next slide, if you will. This is a scene at the top of Bethlehem, the top of Beit Jala, and it's the day that those of us who left Bethlehem left. It was, I think, the 11th of October. This is Jane Easley from the States, a Methodist. And then the next slide, Oscar, if you would give us the next slide as well. And when we get it, this will be, Oscar, next slide, if you will. That's it. We're up now at Sheikh Hussein Bridge. There's King Hussein Bridge, which is in the south, the Allenby Bridge, and this in the north. And you can just see where I've got that silly hat on, but my eyes are rather shot. We didn't want to be leaving, and yet leaving we were. The wrench for me was leaving Bethlehem. Once I was in Jerusalem, I felt differently. In retrospect, we might have stayed longer in Jerusalem. But we were out from the 13th of October to the 1st of December for me, and then back and forth for family reasons. And Muriel, too, made a return early in the year and then back for her father, and it's just been in and out. And that obviously has affected the extent to which we have been able to play our part in ministry in this time of war, though since the 1st of December, able to pick up again. I went back, and it's no surprise at that time of year, Christmas, there are light festivals. Hanukkah is one of them, Christmas is one of them. Came back to a request from Bella Canetti's youth orchestra. And the significance of that is twofold. They're one of the very few youth chamber orchestras that have both Israelis and Palestinian young musicians, as members. And also, St. Andrew's Church is one of the few venues left in the city, Bella tells me, who will have them. And so it was a great way to return after having been out for 7-8 weeks. And here's the string section of that youth choir. 10 days earlier, and if you could, Oscar, now with the next slide, it's another sign. Not that, well, yes, okay, yes, that's the sign. Another reference to light, and in this case it was an interfaith event with Israelis, Jews, and Muslims. Some Muslims came out on the night. There were more Christians, and mostly there were rabbis and Israelis. It was organized with Rabbis for Human Rights and with Sabil. And there was great pressure on this event. You could say, well, all you did was come together and pray for peace. They brought a menorah. It was the 6th day in Hanukkah, and there were 6 candles lit, and 6 rabbis with 6 different messages along the way. And we lit the second candle in Advent. Omar Harami of Sabil and Bishop Emeritus Munib from the Lutherans lit for us. And we felt our way forward, but there was pressure and some pushback afterward from Palestinian Christian friends saying, no one's going to criticize you, but it was too soon for some of us. And it brought home to me again that one can be there however long you're there, and I've not been there long. And you have to say, I will never be a Jew in this world. I will never be a Palestinian in this world. I will never know what this feels like for them. I must play my part. I must know who I am and play my part. And the question of identity is huge. The next slide, Oscar. One of the brighter photos I've ever taken, here near the Jaffa Gate, he was doing a drink that he called the fruit of the Spirit. And on his fruit there, you can see, if you look closely, the words love, peace, goodness, joy. And it was a little bit of a chagrin for me that in buying one of his drinks, I had destroyed, I don't think it was peace, though. I think it was merely goodness that I had destroyed. The next slide then, Oscar. I'm carrying something, in fact, that Omar Harami gave me, and there were maybe 24 of them throughout the Palm Sunday procession. At the very top, you'll see a bit in Arabic, and then in the middle more Arabic. He married up a very clear, visible greeting to the churches in Gaza with different clauses of the parable of the final judgment. So here I was in prison and you visited me was one of them. I was sick and you visited me. Of course, you'll know these. And it's the Church of St. Porphyry's, which is Furious, Orthodox, and Holy Family, which is Latin or Roman Catholic. The next slide, Oscar, shows, in fact, the priest of the Church of the Holy Family, the Latin Church, who, I found out from him and from Mark Falconer, has not been allowed back into Gaza since the war began. He wasn't in Gaza the day it began, and he's the priest of the congregation, and he's not allowed back in to be with his people. At the top of Mount of Olives that day, Palm Sunday, Doug Dix, you won't recognize, a great friend and supporter of St. Andrews, and an ecumenical associate of St. Andrews from the PCUSA, Karen Ekblom of the Swedish Theological College, and Sami Khoury, who is with the Department of Services for Palestinian Refugees, the DSPR of the Near East Council of Churches. And we are funding the assistance we are receiving from you to them to get aid into Gaza. Kenny knows the story a lot better than I do in terms of the way in which the money works, but it's virtually impossible for a bank account in a bank in Israel to transfer funds now to a bank account in a bank on the West Bank, meaning that paying our staff is a big issue, and so on. Next slide, Oscar. We're just working through Holy Week here because it's so huge, a time of coming together with our ecclesiastical partners. Don Binder, looking out on a part of the Garden of Gethsemane. This is Thursday night in Holy Week, and that fence that you see that was keeping us from wandering there had just been put up. It's a double symbol, if you will. Next slide, thanks. This is on a slab of rock near the Church of All Nations, still on Thursday night. And I looked so long at this almost folk art in the stone, and it was flowing, it was flowing, it was flowing like water. And I finally got to Jesus is pouring out his heart to his Father on this stone. Juxtaposed with, if you give us the next slide, Oscar, who can tell us where this is? It's Glasgow. It's the homeless Jesus behind St. George's Tron in Glasgow with somebody who's not homeless, I'm happy to say, sitting at the end of the bench, Sarah, my wife. And I'm showing it just sort of visually to make the connections. The next slide, Oscar. This is now moving on to Good Friday. Archbishop Hossam, you'll just recognize him, Joanna maybe. And the next slide sort of shows both of us. This is after the Via Dolorosa this year, and it was a couple of minutes after he had agreed to send someone. But it's a very significant partnership also with the Evangelical Lutherans. We move on to the next slide, which has a great beauty about it. At the top of the Mount of Olives near Augusta, Victoria, our sunrise service at Easter, all about light, and then of course once the sun's up, all of the lights we brought are there no longer. Been there twice, it's a great privilege. And if you think to the agreement we've signed with the Church of England and the Scottish Episcopal Church, the St. Andrew's Declaration, the goals to deepen our communion and strengthen our mission partner, it had all things going. The next slide is a bit different. We're up now to Christmas greetings. You're going to see Christmas greetings and Easter greetings with the other ancient churches in Jerusalem. This is now Cardinal Pizzaballa of the Latin Church. And then the next slide, Oscar. This is Doug Dix and I with Theophilus III. Theophilus III is the patriarch of the Greek church, and he was reminding me that he knows our land well because we got it from him. And I was saying they want to build a hotel right in our face. Oh, really, who's that? And I said, well, I don't know their name, but we don't want the hotel. But from there, we went into a discussion, quite amazing, of why the risen body of Jesus Christ still has its wounds and isn't healed. It was in his humanity you know, he needed resurrection, and all of humanity's wounds are there for the rising in him. This is Easter greetings with the Armenians. The Coptic Patriarch, it'll take too much time to point everyone out, the Syriac Orthodox, Latin Church represented, and Archbishop Osam is there, Bishop Azar, and so on. These are our partners. And I'll tell you why I included this. The chap right in the middle with the black peaked headwear is the Armenian Patriarch. And one of his fathers said at the Christmas greetings in January, there are 3 Christmases, as you'll know, and 2 Holy Weeks. He said, our unity is our protection. And this is making urgent. We feel more the urgency and the importance of the unity. To the point where by the end of all these Easter greetings, someone had dared to say, perhaps we should be doing something in the Council of Patriarchs and Heads, because they've been accused. They've stood accused by people on the ground, but I don't feel I have the right really to voice all that. Okay, we'll go through the next slides, the next 2 slides quickly. Oscar, this is a slide of as you look at it, over on the right, Anton Goodman, who is the Director of Partnerships for Rabbis for Human Rights, and Karen Eckblom with him, and a rabbi from the States, I think Wisconsin. And this was the beginning of assembling the food packages that were going out at that point to Bedouin camps, and from there, certain communities on the West Bank. We're happy to cooperate with Rabbis for Human Rights, and that partnership has only been strengthening. And then, Oscar, the next one, this is probably not going to detain us, it's just what was in the box. If you've ever done this yourself, and you probably have all done it, you know, how many rices, how many flours, how many pastas go into each. Need to spend more time on the next one, though, the next slide. This is one of the great mothers of the Bedouin community, Al-Khair, who has passed away recently, Haji Aida. She was 97. She took a heart attack during an army raid and never did recover. Took her to hospital in Hebron. Her nephew wrote, she searched for justice all her life. This is one of scores of images and posts that were put up by one of the leaders at Al-Khair over the early weeks of this year in increasing intensity and desperation. And that was certainly the low point, learning of her passing. Coming to an image from Gaza, this I encountered in September already, just before the war started, at the University of Dar al-Khalima. They had an art exhibit. This fellow's playing an oud, almost certainly a lament, in front of darker images, and this was before the war, of life in Gaza. The next image is brighter. It's Mahmoud with an oud at one of the meetings of praying together in Jerusalem. Mahmoud is a Muslim, and that is the outside little portico of a synagogue in West Jerusalem. And staying on this theme of interfaith, the next slide shows Susanna Heschel, the daughter of Abraham Joshua Heschel, a great Hasidic theologian and social activist in the States in the post-war period, barely saved from the Holocaust himself. And she was addressing a conference of rabbis for human rights. And this photo looks very like a conversation on the way to a conversation. I was in a queue to meet her, her father's work having been so significant. He crossed Selma Bridge with Martin Luther King Jr. and later said, "I felt my legs were praying." That was her dad. And she was there resisting the settler movement's influence on the current government as far as she could. On we go to a slide that says everything for itself. This is Zion Gate. Israel being at war, or there being a war in that part of the world, is no new thing. A different kind of wall in the next slide. Bring them home. Photos of those who were still alive and still being held hostage at that stage. This is very close to St. Andrews. This is about a 5-minute walk from St. Andrews. A couple of images now from partners and friends. Don't know what that's saying, Oscar. This is Munther Isaac's book published last year, The Other Side of the Wall. You could stand on either side and then say about the other side of the wall, but he's in Bethlehem, and Bethlehem is the other side for Israelis, and he is, I think his intended audience is those who just don't listen to, who don't get, for whom Palestinians are either the enemy or invisible. And Munther has been huge since the war, and I include it partly for that. This is a slide now of Amal Nassar, Daoud Nassar's sister, with his wife Jihan and his mother. They're waiting outside the Palestinian doorway into the military court north of Ramallah. And they've only been at it for 33 years now. And I went up with them, and they let me in the first part, and then they said, you can't come any further, we want you to leave now. And this is what they're saying to diplomats and church people who go and try and sit in the sessions. We're not allowed. The next slide. Screen's gone down. I think in the interest of time, I'm showing a shot of Daoud at that table of his outside his home on the farm. And Rebecca and the delegation from Faith Action, Resource and Presence were hearing what he was saying. There we are. We move quickly on now, just moving quickly. This is Omar Harami of Sabil and a number of others, some Christians, some Jewish, in the planning meeting. And the planning meeting is for the march on the 3rd of June that's coming up. It's a Human Rights and Peace March just before Flag Day, which is a day of extremist nationalism from some Israelis through the old city. And we're planning, and it's very difficult. Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Christians, will they even be able to get out of the West Bank to be on it, in which case the only Palestinians will be those who live in East Jerusalem or the old city. And it's really difficult. Issues of trust among ourselves, the need to spend more time that we are tighter with each other because of the risks. And people are at risk differently. A rabbi who gets arrested at such a march this year would probably be out the same day. Would it be the same for a Muslim from the West Bank? That kind of question. Some shots now of St. Andrew's Church itself. Yes, that one, all adults in the room. And you can see there's a laptop there. We've got a hybrid service. People join in by Zoom link, and some who are there physically. Then the next Oscar, if you will, with the children. We had both of our young families there that day, and all their kids, and it just transformed the place, as you can see. I've got a shot from Anzac Day this year, which is slightly out of theme, but it brings us back to what I said at the beginning. Right now is a season of memory, and the Anzac Day comes the same time as the main memorial, and Muriel and I go every year, and this continues the tradition, because St. Andrew's Church is a memorial church and is known as such, and we get the invitations. I get to read Psalm 23 and have the final benediction at the Anzac. I'm going to show you a shot now of the bell tower at St. George's Cathedral, which is where I live, not where the big windows are, but just under the big windows. It's 2 levels. It gives me as well friends and colleagues round and about, and that kind of interaction, which is good for the soul. The next slide is a slide of my friend and colleague, Muriel, in front of the hotel, this lush, beautiful scene. It's a different kind of photo from the day we left. This is a photo about being back. A bit of a tree theme coming now. This is the new moderator of the International Presbytery, and this is the tree outside of St. Andrew's, Rome. We had great meetings, and it's just a symbol of the one sort of level or circle of support, prayer support and collegiality that we share in, being the ministers where we are. I've got a shot next, the penultimate slide, of the Tree of Life, which I got near the Jaffa Gate. And its fruit is for food, and its leaves for cure, or its leaves for the healing of the nations. Starts in Genesis, and you still are encountering it in Revelation. It's a wonderful symbol. It's a symbol of hope for me. And then, to conclude, a shot of St. Andrew's Church and Guest House. You'll notice that our lights are still on. You'll notice that our door is still open. It's a skeleton staff, and it's long hours under duress in a terrible time, and we're keeping those doors open. And part of it is your support, your prayer support, your financial support. It's a difficult moment on a very, very long journey. There's no way to gather it up in one sentence, but if I was going to try, my mind went to the word horror. And I was trying to find language that people on both sides of the war could perhaps hear. Perhaps they can't. When horror follows horror, thinking of the war following the 7th of October. When horror follows horror, we need a radical witness to the justice and peace of Christ from pastoral hearts for all people, upholding the equal right of all to live and be honored. That would be my long attempt at a sentence. Shorter and punchier is what the DSPR has on the donations page of their website. Commitment is measured in service. I thought how true and how it hits us right between the eyes. Thank you. Well, it's my great joy to ask Joanna to come forward now. Joanna, if you would. Perhaps we could raise her up in the usual way. I think what we'll do, we'll use the microphone back and forth. Okay. So we've met on Zoom 3 times, and I know what the answers to the questions I'm going to ask are, I think, but you may, of course, take wing in a different direction. Joanna Billa is a teacher of visual arts at, in fact, an Orthodox school in Amman in Jordan. She is a member of her local church and has been all her life. And she is representing the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem here at the General Assembly. When we were talking, you know, you'd never heard of the General Assembly, you didn't know what it was or what it did. And then the notion of speaking, well, what would I say? And we were talking, and because, you know, I was going with what I knew about you, that visual arts is your thing, and how Munter had put that doll of the baby Jesus under all the pile of stones in his church. His nativity was so different. And then we started to talk a bit differently. And you said something about your grandmother. Yeah. Do you want to say a word about your grandma?
Before I say anything, I would just like to say how honored I am to be here today and get to know all of you and have the chance to come to Scotland, meet everyone, and tell you my experience as a Palestinian Jordanian living in Jordan as a Christian and with the war that's going on right now. So I was telling Stewart the other day when we were in the Zoom meeting, my mother from my dad's side has always been living in Jerusalem. She was in Ramleh her whole life. And then in 1947, when the Nakba happened first time, she had to evacuate. The war happened, the Jews came in, and they had to evacuate. She was 12 years old. So she had to evacuate, she came to Jordan, and then when she was 16, she had to get married. And she started her life. She had 9 children. So my whole life, since I was just a child, that's everything that I've been listening to. My grandmother telling me stories about how her life was in Ramle, how her friends. She memorized till this day, until she died in December, but until then, she memorized every teacher she ever gave classes to, every student that was in her class, everything that happened in Ramle, even though she had Alzheimer's, she had dementia. She couldn't remember anything except her life in Jerusalem, in Ramle. So all I ever grew up with was the stories that she always taught us, she always told us. And when the dementia started happening with her, her memory kind of experienced something new, and she started seeing Ramle in our house. So which is something I didn't mention to you. But
And Grumley is...
Ramle is in Palestine. Ramle.
Yes, Ramle.
Yeah, she's from there. She always lived there.
Yes.
So she would be sitting in our living room and seeing the trees that was in Palestine. And we would get so confused, but we'd understand her because we know all the stories. So it was amazing how she forgets everything. She even forgot us. She forgot her son. But Ramle always stayed with her. When the dementia started to get worse, we always asked her stuff about her life in order to jog her memory a little bit, try to let her remember something, try to remember us. And the only thing that she remembered always was Palestine, the time there. We asked her about the time when everyone came and they had to get evacuated. That she remembers very well. And keep in mind, she was only 12 years old. She was so young. But in the end, she, with the dementia, she forgot everything except her life there. And we tried to go there in April. I was just telling Rebecca about that. I've never been to Palestine, even though I am originally a Palestinian, but it's very hard for us to go there now, especially in Jordan now. So I tried to go in April, but in order to go there, I have to apply for the Israeli embassy, not the Palestinian embassy, which is also sad for us. So they told us that they have to keep our passport for 6 months in their embassy, and then after the 6 months, they think about giving the visa to us or not. So we couldn't do that. So it's a very thin opportunity for us to be there, which is something very sad for us. Yeah. Thank you.
We were talking about the situation and how you see the situation and maybe how your friends see the situation of the war being next door in Jordan. And you told me one night you looked up in the sky and so on. Do you want to say a bit about that and your friend's response?
Yeah, sure. So I work with a Christian organization called Young Life, which is in about 100 countries. We work with youth people to bring them closer to God. So we had a camp or training in Wadi Rum in Jordan. It was us, Jordanians, Lebanese, Palestinians, Kurdistan, and Americans. The Americans were the ones who gave the training to us because they're the ones who initiated Young Life, which is the name of the organization. And while we were in Wadi Rum, the Iran-Israeli missile started, which was our last day in Wadi Rum in Jordan. About 50 or 60 people from us were Palestinians, from Jenin, Beit Lahem, and Zababde. So even though they're living there, they didn't know that they're going to experience it even in Jordan, which is also new to us. We never experienced anything like this. So while we were in Wadi Rum, it was our last day. We were all hanging with each other because this was the first time we all got to know each other that day. And the missiles started happening. The news went crazy. Everyone was talking about it, and everyone panicked. Jordanians panicked, Palestinians especially panicked, and the border. The next day they were going home to Palestine, but the border closed. So everyone was panicking, everyone was crying, everyone was talking to their parents, making sure it's okay. And one of the missiles actually was dropped in Jordan. We saw it. It was in near the airport road. I don't know if anyone has been there, but one of the missiles dropped in Jordan. So it was pure panic to everyone, especially the Palestinians. But it got us thinking, like, as Jordanians, one missile dropped in Jordan, didn't hit anyone, no injuries, nothing, and everyone was panicked, everyone was crying. So imagine living like the Palestinians. How, as much as we see videos, as much as we hear stories, we can never imagine how they live there. I can never understand their feeling of living there. So I talked to a lot of them that day, and they showed us videos, they showed us a lot of things. I can never understand their feeling of living there. I can only see it on videos and stories. So it was very traumatizing for us, but it's nothing compared to what they've been through all these years. Yeah.
And if you had a word to the church in places like Scotland, what would you want to say to brothers and sisters in Christ who live in these parts? Or do you want to wait to see how General Assembly goes and then answer the question?
I think I'll wait because I can give a message now, but it's still my first day. I want to get the hang of it. I want to get to know more people and talk to more people. See each one's experience, stories, and then I'm sure I'll have a different perspective then. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Well handled. Thank you very much, Joanna. You might want to hang around. So that was first part, second part. The third part is questions and answers, or questions and responses might be more accurate. And if they're for Joanna, well, we'll get the microphone to her. I'm aware that all of you have been involved and that I'm joining veterans, and it's just funny who ends up speaking, because any of you could have been the speaker today. Yes?
Do you have any guests in the guest house in St Andrews just now, and are there any guests in the guest house at St George's?
We have very, very few bookings at the guest house, but the doors have stayed open. Initially, Lillian, the manager, was putting it around to the journalists of the world who'd flooded in, and got the Australians over the course of possibly 2 months with more and less numbers of them to stay, and that helped keep the door open. There are some local folk. There's some who've come up from Tel Aviv, I know, as well as Israelis. Then there have been some internationals, but the day I left, which was Monday, I think we had one, and that's rough. St. George's, it's the same, very few guests. There's a staff that lives there of the college, and there's sufficient staff to run the guest house and keep the security going, but it's nothing like life, usual life. Yes. I need you to produce your voice, sir. If you could come up to the front or just bellow. Yes. Reasons for the country, reasons for the war varying from country to country. So you're asking about sources of information and how reliable they are? Yes, it does differ. Okay, hang on a sec. It can't not differ.
Thank you. So any Arab news is the same. whether it's Palestinian, Jordanian, whatever. But if you open to any like CNN, American, English, anything that's not Arab news, it is different because it's gonna be biased. When the war first started in Gaza in October, a lot of the CNN on the news, they like put false information on the news, and no one knew. That's why it was a lot of people were. Sorry. For us, no. For foreign countries, yes. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happened. And some of the news on the TV got shut down from this. Al Jazeera, which is an Arab news, got shut down, but they got it back up. And CNN got shut down for a while because they were spreading false information about the war.
Well, that's one that could run and run. I don't know who it was who said first that the first casualty of war is truth. You get the massaging, the editing, with public witness all over the show. Very interesting.
There seem to me to be subtleties even within jurisdictions. The most obvious one in our country is that the BBC use language which promulgates the official United Kingdom stance about Hamas, for example, and they always preface talking about Hamas as a terrorist organisation, which is the government's official position. ITV, however, that's the independent television, does not use that phrase.
I see.
So there are subtle differences even within jurisdictions, which of course is all plays to the things, what is truth, and so on. It's history is written by the victor.
Yes.
Always.
Well, it's a new thing as a Canadian to be being targeted for genocide. The government of Canada has been accused of complicity in genocide, together with the UK and all sorts of other countries. I was getting a haircut. Last haircut I got in East Jerusalem. Majid's salon, I can recommend it. People come in, say hello. One chap came in, he said, "Where are you from?" "Canada." "Oh, sorry about your government, Canada." "Sorry, Canada. Bye-bye, Canada." And he went out the door. And this is a new experience for me.
Can I
Yes.
just ask a more general question? Jerusalem is one aspect of our work in the Holy Land. What's currently happening at Tabitha School and also in Tiberias?
Tabitha School has kept functioning. That's the first thing. And the next thing I want to say is a huge thank you and shout out to Mona Askar, the head, and to Kenny, who works closely with her. We have had challenges, real challenges, not only because of the diversity of the student and the faculty body, Israeli and Palestinian, and then international, and then Druze sometimes, and so on. Not only that, but the question of paying a just wage, the question of enrollment. These questions are the constant ones, the size of the grant that we're getting from the government with other independent schools, and how we're all doing sort of as a bundle at this time. There was initially some distance learning because not all of the students could fit into the bomb shelter if it had to be accessed. That, though, quickly moved to people being able, I say quickly, it seemed quickly to me to go back to school. So there are real tensions, and there are a lot of great people on the board of governors, and it's a full agenda, as you might imagine. Tiberias, I didn't answer fully your question about, you said guests at St. George's. I thought you were going to say Tiberias. We don't have guests, but we have people who've been displaced from northern settlements, up to 100, who have set up, as you'll know, school or creche and things like that there. The church, Muriel has opened the doors again, and she had 8 people who just found their way to us, and that's people who none of them were regulars, so that's just a little sign of either people being round and about or coming back, starting to. But it's nothing like it used to be, no. Is that the chairperson giving me the hook? Ian. And Ian and Kenny, I'll just let you ask the question and answer it.
Not a question, just positive news in that this morning I saw on Facebook that the Latin Patriarch, Cardinal Pizzabella, and Father Gabriel had entered Gaza yesterday and gone back to the church. And
has he gone back?
And the hope is that Gabriel will be able to stay in Gaza while Pizzabella goes back to Jerusalem. But that was on somebody's Facebook feed this morning, so that's a nice positive news.
Was that the Friends Facebook feed? Yes, well, then I should have looked at it, because as far as I knew, Father Gabriel had not been back, so that's good.
Two things. Firstly, Ian yet again stole my thunder, because that's exactly what I was going to say. But we had the privilege of meeting with Father Gabriel 3 weeks ago in Scotland, and he did something in the Glasgow Concert Hall, which the moderator and myself and Ian were at. Very, very powerful to see him and to hear from him. And secondly, I just want to clarify, when Stewart said northern settlements, he didn't really mean settlements, he meant northern villages. Just so that you're all very clear that the people in the hotel are from a place just near Kiryat Shmona, which is in Israel, just in the north, and they had to be removed because they're within 2 miles of the border with Lebanon and facing rocket fire basically every day.
So villages is the word. Villages. All right. Andrew? It's all in pieces, but it works.
I think we're done. Before Stewart says the blessing, which I asked him to say, of course we want to say thank you for the expected treat of hearing Stewart, and for the hoped for but not necessarily expected treat of hearing Joanna. We're very, very grateful to you both. Thank you very much.
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Amen. Thank you.